Good morning, Humber Valley. My name is Trevor Brisbin, and welcome to the first week of Lent. Lent is the 6 weeks from Ash Wednesday through Maundy, Thursday, or essentially Easter weekend, where Christians mark Christ's journey toward the cross. What most people think about when they think about Lent is giving something up, right? Often Christians will give up chocolate or carbs or alcohol or some kind of pleasure in order to show solidarity with Christ's suffering and sacrificing his death. Or, if we're really being honest, to lose a little bit of weight in the name of Jesus. But thinking about Lent this year, it feels kind of cruel to think about giving up more. Like COVID has taken so much already. So as we contemplate Lent, what if rather than taking something away that will further frustrate pandemic life, what if we added something to our rhythm over the next several weeks? What if we added something that might promote greater health and coping and processing the difficulties already there? Like, is there a way where the goal isn't to suffer more, but begin to better process and live amidst the hurts and disappointments we already may be carrying? And into this comes the Book of Lamentations. The Book of Lamentations is part of the Hebrew Bible right after the books of Isaiah and Jeremiah. It's a small book, a collection of 5 poems that explore the scope and depth of human loss, grief, and sorrow. And over the next several weeks, I want to propose that the Book of Lamentations becomes our guide for Lent's journey. Like, what does Lamentations have to say to us as Lenten people? And fair warning, like, this one's intense. This book is raw. Listen to how it starts off. Lamentations chapter 1. How deserted lies the city, once so full of people. How relevant does that sound? How like a widow is she, who once was great among the nations. She who is queen among the provinces has now become a slave. Bitterly she weeps at night. Tears run down her cheeks among all her lovers. There is no one to comfort her. All her friends have betrayed her. All have become her enemies. After affliction and harsh labor, Judah has gone into exile. She dwells among the nations. She finds no resting place. All who pursue her have overtaken her in the midst of her distress. Right? Like, talk about a feel-good passage. This is where Lamentations starts. Like, this is the beginning. This is the first impressions. This is Lamentations once upon a time. Have you ever been in a place in life where the pain or the trauma or the level of damage is so great that it feels like it's oozing out of you? Like you begin each day with pain, you end each day with sorrow. It haunts you. Like you're not even sure how you want to talk about it, or even if you can talk about it. You're not sure how to categorize it. You don't even know where to begin to process it. But it's a pain that permeates every part of you. Lamentations takes us into the darkest and most vulnerable places of the human experience. Scholars date Lamentations in the 6th century BC. Somewhere around 500-ish years before Jesus was born, this book gets written. Between the years 597 and 537 BC, Jerusalem was a target of a series of attacks from both the Babylonians and the Egyptians, who, for the record, were also at war with each other. Eventually, the Babylonians defeat the Egyptians and turn the full force of their military empire on Jerusalem. Now, Jerusalem was home primarily to a tribe of people called the tribe of Judah. Do you remember ancient Israel is made up of 12 tribes? The majority of those who live in Jerusalem are from the tribe, the people of Judah. And in 587 BC, Jerusalem is invaded and Judah is devastated by the Babylonians. Many of the tribe are taken as slaves back to Babylon. That's why you hear songs about Israel being in exile. This is exactly the time this is happening. Families were split up. Children were snatched from their parents. There was starvation. The temple, the center of Jewish life, is destroyed. There's no hyperbole to say that life becomes a literal hell. Judah is calling out, God, where are you? Does anyone know what that feels like? This book is written amidst years of living under occupation, oppression, insecurity, and fear. You don't know from one day to the next if you're going to live. You don't even know if you want to live because the people you love the most have been taken. And you're left behind in the rubble of this city trying to make sense of how in the world do you get through today. Now, the Book of Lamentations, which comes from the Greek word thorenai. Thorenai means lamentations. But this book was originally written in Hebrew and is part of the Hebrew Bible. The Hebrew name of Lamentations, and apologies to anyone who speaks Hebrew because I'm going to butcher this, but is the name of this book is Sefer Echa. Sefer Echa. It literally means the book of how. The book of how. Have you ever stood in the space where what you were facing feels so insurmountable and daunting that you think to yourself, how am I going to get through this? How am I going to pay this bill? How am I going to tell the kids that the cancer's back? How do I find a reason to get out of bed today? How do I live without them? How? This is the book of how. How do I even begin to work through this pain and disappointment that I carry with me every day? How? How do we talk to others about the raw and vulnerable parts that are woven into our story? How? How do we become a church where working through pain and sharing our genuine sadness with each other is normalized? How? How do we become a community where neighbors can process COVID grief because it's a thing and process it in a meaningful and restorative way? See, Lamentations takes us into the unbearable and disorienting places of life, names them, and says somehow we need to talk about this. So I would say one of the first things we should take from the Book of Lamentations is that a healthy spirituality, a mature faith, is one that creates space for the honest emotions and experiences of life to be expressed, no matter what those are. I think often people have this sense that being spiritual or being a person of faith, there's this low-grade sense that it should make the worst parts of life somehow easier. Like Like if you're spiritual, then loss and grief and heartbreak and rejection and loneliness somehow doesn't impact you in the same way. Like it somehow now all of a sudden has magic meaning. Sometimes you'll even hear people apologize for being in pain. You ever notice that? I got an email from a colleague this week who said, "Sorry, I didn't get back to you sooner. I just got a cancer diagnosis." It's like, what? Like, sorry? Like, don't say sorry for getting back to me a day late. Like, I'm sorry. You don't say sorry. I had another dear friend text me saying, "Sorry, I'm not myself, still working through my mom's death," which is like 3 weeks old at this point. Why would you ever, like dear friend, why would you ever apologize for living with those very real and appropriate emotions? What Lamentations holds out for all of us is not a spirituality absent of suffering, or where we need to apologize for our suffering, but in fact the opposite. It offers a solidarity of spirituality amidst and for our suffering. Spirituality of suffering isn't something we spend a ton of time talking about in our world, is it? I think often we spend more time denying it than dealing with it. More time repressing it than we do expressing it. But remember, healthy spirituality, mature faith, creates the space for the honest emotions and experiences of life to express themselves. That's important to know, and it matters for us as a church. Peter Rollins is a philosopher. I think I talked about him last week. But he has this piercing critique of the church, where he says the church in the West has become like a crack house. Yeah, like a crack house. For some people, when they lose their job or there's a breakup or someone they love dies, the pain and emotion is so intense. The instinct is to kill a bottle or two of wine, to get to the bar and just go hard, or to take some drugs and numb the pain. But what inevitably happens is there's this brief escape where you feel better, but then you wake up the next morning and the pain and the problem is still there, only now you're also dealing with a hangover. You don't deal with the problem, it just gets kicked further down the street, where maybe you repress it again with more booze or more drugs. It's been said that the problem is never alcoholism. Rather, alcoholism is a really bad solution to another problem. And this is our temptation, to always want to feel good, to never be confronted by the pain of life or the trauma of being. It's the always trying to remain positive. So like a crack house exists for whenever someone wants to escape their problems, sometimes churches begin to see themselves as the place where people come to feel better, to get away from the problems. Like come to church every Sunday, hear a positive message, sing happy songs, and you're good to go for the week. Like you got the spiritual high to get you through. But friends, what if church is at its best? Not when it's sugarcoating or oppressing or avoiding the pain of our humanity, but exposing it, expressing it, putting it on the table to talk about. Do you have any idea what this feels like? Yeah, that's horrible. We should talk about that. We probably can't fix it, but let's face it together. If those kind of conversations are happening at church, that's a church I want to go to. If you go through a breakup, what's the better path? Whenever you're missing the person, just keep drinking, just keep the party going, jump into the rebound relationship, do whatever you can to avoid the feelings, which for the record don't go away, they just get buried deeper, they just get repressed further down. Or do you let the feelings come? Do you grab coffee with a friend and describe exactly how bad it is for you? Do you put on the really sad singer-songwriter music and let yourself cry for hours or weeks? Do you look at the old photographs and begin to journal all that was lost? Always trying to escape the pain and keep positive ultimately leaves us empty. And I know that sounds depressing, right? Who wants to come to church, or in our case, click onto church and hear about all that? What a downer that is. I don't want to go to church to hear about my problems. I go to church to forget about them for 1 hour a week. But in the long run, what if confronting the reality of our pain is exactly what our humanity is crying out for? What if church, what if Humber Valley was the place where even the hardest parts of the human experience could be expressed? I wonder if one of the things our world needs more than ever are spiritual people. People with a faith deep enough to lament. Did you know that in ancient Israel there were actually people whose job it was to be professional mourners? Like there's a job description for our spiritual ancestors where people were employed to cry in order to help the community mourn and grieve and work through their feelings. Okay, check this out. Jeremiah chapter 9, starting verse 17. Listen to this. This is what the Lord says. Consider now, call all the wailing women to come. Send for the most skillful of them. Okay, pause. God's saying, call for all the wailing women to come. Like this is the moment where we need all the people who know how to cry, who know how to mourn, who know how to grieve really well. We need those people in the room. Send for the most skillful of them. Like, we don't want the B-list criers. We don't want the B-list grievers. Like, bring us the really good ones, the most skilled ones. Crying, grieving, wailing, feeling the feelings of life is a skill. We want the most skillful ones. It's something that we need to learn from each other and with each other. It's something that takes the 10,000 hours to do really well. Consider now, call all the wailing women to come. Send for the most skillful of them. Let them come quickly and wail over us till our eyes overflow with tears and water streams from our eyelids. Sometimes, if we don't know where to begin with our own pain and disappointments, it really helps to have another person lead the way for us. Professional mourners become that for ancient Israel. I wonder if Lamentations might become that for us. And perhaps Humber Valley, we might become that. Skillful mourners, skillful feelers of the feelings for our friends, our family, our neighborhood, and this devastated city that we live in. So as we continue this Lenten journey, we know it leads to one place, a cross. And It's a painful journey. It's a tough journey. But perhaps it's exactly the one we need to be on. And as we go together, may we allow Lamentations to become our soundtrack. Chilling, unsettling, and calling into the deepest, most complicated parts of our humanity to come alive, to hear the divine whispering amidst our disappointment, to know that our grief, our sadness isn't a lack of spirituality, but its very soul. For in the cry for help and in the lament of despair is the Christ of the cross. And this, my friends, is the gospel of Jesus Christ.